their technologies. China will be the largest market for their products. With China, they can have high profit. With high profit, they can continue to invest in R&D. They can maintain their technological leadership. But if they lose the Chinese market, it's going to turn from high profitability to low profitability or even loss. And it's not only affect their performance in 1 year, they will not have ability to continue to invest in R&D, and they are going to lose their technological leadership. So to help China will be an issue of death or life for those leading companies in the US. And for the US people, they also need to have a product from China so they can maintain their lifestyle, they can maintain their living standards. So with that three reasons, US is a very pragmatic country. They will accept the rise of China, and they will accept China to be the largest economy in the world and the second largest. But the issue is that China has maintained 8.9% growth continuously for 46 years. We never observed such a high growth rate for any country to maintain such a high growth rate for so long. And so whether China will be able to maintain its prosperity, its growth in the coming years has been an issue debated. Many people argue China may already reach the peak. Like Japan in the 1980s, they reached a peak at the time. Their GDP measured by market exchange rate was about 65% of the US, like China now. But now, Japan's GDP was only 20% of the US. And while China followed the footsteps of Japan, it's an issue has been debated. Some people is pessimistic about China, think China will follow the footsteps of Japan. And so by that, US will maintain its dominance continuously. Well, to answer this question, we need to understand the nature of modern economics. That is one subject my new structural economics try to have a better understanding. The nature of modern economics is a continuous technological innovation and industrial upgrading, which raises productivity and particular GDP. It's the same for advanced country or for the developing country. If you want to maintain economic growth, you need to have a technological innovation and an industrial upgrading. But for advanced country and a poor country in a catching up process, the mechanism will be different. For the advanced country, since the Industrial Revolution, their technology and industry have been on the global frontiers. If they want to have a technological innovation or industrial upgrading, they will have to invent those technology or industries. If they are successful, certainly it will be very profitable. But we know most of the technology innovation failed. So with that, the advanced country only average their annual GDP growth rate per capita was about 2%, in the whole century, in the 20th century, even up to now. Plus the population growth rate, their GDP growth rate will be around 3%. But for a developing country, we are only catching up process. We have something called latecomers advantages. Because we can borrow technology, we can import technology, we can imitate technology as a way for technological innovation and industrial upgrading. If a developing country utilize the latecomers advantage well, their growth rate can be twice, like Thailand, 4.9%, income country only 2.5% in the past 50 years. Like China, 8.9%, and the high-income country only 2.5%. So the issue whether China can maintain dynamic economic growth very much depends on how large the latecomers' advantages China still enjoyed. And how to measure the latecomer advantages? I think the best way is to look into the gap of per capita GDP. Because per capita GDP is a measurement of average productivity, average industrial achievement in the country. And in 2019, the per capita GDP of China was 22.6% of the US. 22.6% of the US. It was Germany in 1946. It was Japan in 1956. It was Korea in 1985. And this good performing industrialized country, they enjoy 16 years of 8% or more growth. For example, Germany, from 1946 to 1962, its GDP growth rate was 9.4% per year. And population growth rate for Germany at that time was 0.8%. So per capita GDP growth rate in Germany was 8.6% per year for those 16 years. For Japan, from 1956 to 1972, its GDP growth rate was 9.6%, and the population growth rate was 1%. So per capita GDP growth rate was 8.6%, similar to Germany. And for Korea, from 1985 to 2008, 2001, those 16 years, 85 to 2001, Korea's GDP growth rate was 9%, and the population growth rate was 0.9%. So per capita GDP growth rate was 8.1%. And if those three countries can achieve per capita GDP growth rate of 8% and more, I think there's a potential for China to achieve per capita GDP growth rate of 8%. And a per capita GDP growth rate in China is similar to GDP growth rate because due to aging, slowdown in population growth, now the annual population growth in China is almost zero. So that means per capita GDP growth rate is the same as the GDP growth rate. So from the latecomers' advantages, China has a potential to grow at 8% from 2019 to 2035. But compared to Germany, Japan, and Korea, China has one advantage that they do not have in that period of time. That's the fourth industrial revolution, the big data and artificial intelligence. What the big data and artificial intelligence? It's a product of fourth industrial revolution. So China stands in the same starting line as any other country. And also, in this fourth industrial revolution, China has three advantages. The first one, China has large pool of talents. The science, technology, engineer, and the mathematics graduate in China each year is more than 6 million. And you combine all the OECD countries, China has more graduates in the STEM. So China has the advantages of human power, human capital. Secondly, China has the largest domestic markets. Any new product, new innovation, you can immediately reach the large domestic market and enjoy economic scale reduce the cost of production, and it will be very competitive. And the third one, if this new technology requires hardware, China has the best supply chain. China has the most complete manufacturing ecologies. So any idea you want to make into a product, China can have the easiest way, the lowest possible cost, the shortest possible time. So with this fourth industrial revolution, plus the later advantages, I'm confident China still have a growth potential of 8% per year up to 2035. Certainly, it's only a potential. If you want to realize the potential, certainly you also need to handle the geopolitical tension between China and US and other tensions. China also needs to cope with the global climate changes. China also needs to improve our social security to take care of the aging people and so on. But with 8% growth potential, I'm confident China will be able to maintain the 5% or more growth up to 2035. And I use a similar analysis. I think from 2036 to 2050, China should have 6% growth potential. And China should be able to maintain 3 to 4% growth in those 15 years. And if China realizes those growth, as I mentioned, 5% or more growth up to 2031, and around 3.5% growth from 2036 to 2050. China will achieve 4.5% growth throughout from 2019 to 2050. And why I mentioned 4.5% growth. Because as I mentioned, in 2019, the per capita GDP in China was 22.6% of the US. And if China maintained 4.5% by the time of 2049, the per capita GDP in China will be 50% of the US per capita GDP. Because from 2019 to 2049, in 30 years, if per capita GDP in China wants to increase from 22.6% of the US to 50% of the US, China's GDP growth rate needs to have 2.7% higher than the US per capita GDP growth rate. And the US per capita GDP growth rate in the past 50, 60 years was 1.8%. So 1.8% plus 2.7%, that's 4.5%. So if China can realize the growth as I described, by the time of 2049, China's per capita GDP will be 50% of the US. China's economic size will be twice as large as the US. And the advanced part of China, their income level will be the same as the US. By that, US will accept China to be the largest economy in the world. And the conflict between China and the US will be resolved. And the global economic orders and the global governance will come into a new peaceful period. Starting with that, China realized the dream of becoming a middle high-income country by the time of 2035, and advanced country by the time of 2049, when China celebrates the centennials of the founding of People's Republic. And China will realize the dream of rejuvenation of the nation, and certainly China will continue to contribute more than 30% of growth to the world each year. China will continue to be the largest exporting market for Thailand, largest trading partner for Thailand, largest source of tourism from China, and the largest foreign direct investment to China, and contribute to the Thailand to become a high-income country by the time of 2035, so we can enjoy the common prosperity together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor